Hey everybody, hope everybody's having a good night here this Sunday evening. And I realize that Phish is doing their stream right now, so probably not a good idea for me to be doing this, but it's kind of the only time I can do it. And if anybody's not watching the Phish concert, they can check this out and or watch it later. It'll be up on the channel anyway. So what I thought would be cool tonight is to go over some foundational stuff for music theory and just understanding the guitar as an instrument in general. Pretty often, a couple of the main questions I'll get are just trying to learn like the fretboard a little better, or how music theory might work a little better for you so that you can get around and improvise a little better, or even just how to orient yourself. So that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. And for some people, it might be stuff you already know. It could be kind of a basic bit of information. So if that's the case, it might not be the best one for you tonight. But if you're feeling like you're kind of at the beginning of that journey, then there could be some cool stuff in this stream tonight. So, everything that I'm going to talk about, or not everything, but probably most of what I'm going to talk about tonight is going to revolve around the major scales of foundation, and that'll be the starting point. So what I'm going to do is talk about C major first, I guess, as a reference. Or actually, you know what? What we'll talk about is the circle of fifths. This is something that can be a really cool tool, a really good tool to help you remember how the keys work, how many sharps are in the keys, how many flats might be in any given key, what to even call the notes in the key that you're playing in, and so on. So we'll start with that. Now, the circle of fifths that we've probably all seen, that is a circle, isn't particularly useful as a concept sometimes on an instrument like the guitar, or it doesn't jive that well with the layout of our instrument because it's so linear. It goes across, like a piano too, same kind of thing. So what I think of is, and this is in a video I did called Ideas for Improv, is the second one that I did. I talked about visualization, and this is one of the things I talked about, but I'll talk about it again right now because I think it might be helpful. So it's more of a zigzag of fifths is how I see it. So if you look from left to right, the first note that we're going to have is C. Now, the key of C has no sharps or flats, and so it's a really nice starting point. It's on a piano, it would be all the white keys, no black keys. So then if you think of this in terms of how the guitar lays out, we're going to start that C on the 3rd fret of A, which is a C. So if you think about, let's see if I can get my guitar above this thing, just how you play a C chord, that's our note right there. So we're going to play, and I'll show it on the fretboard when I'm done talking about this, but we're going to go 3rd fret of A, and then we're going to jump up to the low E string, 3rd fret, and that is the key of G. Now, the way that this works, hey, what's up, Jonathan? Hope you're doing well, man. Yeah, I'll talk about this thing in a minute. This is my baby. I love this thing. So now as we go to the key of G, what happens is we add 1 sharp, and it's going to be an F sharp. And so that's how it's going to go until we get up to the key of F sharp or G flat. Then we're going to start going a different way. So we went from C, no sharps or flats, to the key of G, which is the next string up on the same fret. So 3rd fret of A, 3rd fret of E. And I'm going to take this thing away for a moment. One really good practice as well is to go through and actually verbalize the notes and say them out loud. And this can double as a really good way to memorize your fretboard. And I feel like my internet is kind of laggy right now, so hold on one second. I'm going to see if I can fix this up. And cool. Uh, so try verbalizing the notes as you play them. So we've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And as you can see, you always just go with the alphabet. And one thing also that's important to remember is that all the keys have to have all of the letters. So if we're in the key of C, we have to go from a C to a C in alphabetical order. And that'll help make sense of the sharps and the flats as we go. Now, the key of G, so remember we added that one sharp and it was an F sharp in the key of G. We go G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and there it is, G. Now, I'm going to pull up the graphic here again, and we'll see that then we're going to kind of zigzag over and go to the key of D. And as you guys can see there, we're going to use the 5th fret of A is our note for D, or our spot where we're going to play D, because we can play it in a couple different spots at that register, but we're going to use that. And we have 2 sharps now, and we're going to have a C sharp that we're going to add into the mix. So I'll take this away again and go back to it. So we went from C to G to D, and here we are. So we alphabetical order, add an F sharp and a C sharp. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and then you're back to D. So let's keep it moving. Now, just like we went from C to G for the first 2, and then we zigzagged over to the key of D, now we're going to go up a string, same fret, and be in the key of A, and now we're going to have 3 sharps. And the new sharp we're going to add is G sharp. So now we've got F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. And so as you can see, you keep the sharps from the previous keys, and then you keep adding. So if we want to do that one, then we're going to be A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. Cool. We're going to keep it cruising because I want to try to cover a lot of ground, but I feel like this will be some good foundational stuff to talk about, even though, again, I think, you know, some of you guys will know all this stuff, and it's all good. Now we're going to go, so we went C, G, we zigzagged over to D, then A, and then we're going to zigzag over again from 5th fret to 7th fret of A, and now we're going to be in the key of E, and the key of E is going to have 4 sharps, and they are going to be F sharp, we're going to have that in the mix, G sharp, we're going to have C sharp, and D sharp, and so that'll look like this if we're playing it in this position. 7th fret of A, we go E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and then you're back to E. Now, we just did 7th fret of A, and now we're going to jump up to 7th fret of low E to get the key of B, which is our next one in the circle of fifths. And we're going to have 5 sharps now. So the next one is going to have 6, and then we're kind of maxed out, and we'll go backwards after that. Now, we have F sharp, G sharp from the other one, C sharp, and D sharp. Now we're going to add A sharp, and that'll be all of our sharps for the key of B. So if we say it out loud, we go B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. Cool. Now, as we move to the next one here, we're going to go from, we were on the 7th fret of A, 7th fret of E. Now we're going to jump over to the 9th fret of A, and that'll give us the key of F sharp, or we can call it the key of G flat. And I just noticed on the picture here that there's I didn't hit the shift button in time, and so it says F3 right there / G flat. I meant to say F sharp. So just in case you look at that and you're like, what is going on here? That's what happened there. So in the key of F sharp, we would have 6 sharps. If we call it the key of G flat, we would have 6 flats. So let's talk through F sharp. We'll go through both. And so we start here, 9th fret of A, and we're going to be F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. Then we have C sharp, or sorry, yeah, C sharp. Oh gosh, I'm having a hard time. D sharp, and then we have an E sharp, and then we're back to F sharp. So the only one that is a natural is B. So you know, even just going through that and verbalizing it is kind of a trip sometimes, because we're probably not used to saying E sharp too often. But it's useful to know that, because you may come across a transcription that's in that key, and you might see that and wonder, well, what's going on here? And that's how it works out. Because remember, we have to have all of the letters in alphabetical order in any given key. So once again here, F sharp, G sharp. There's my dog barking. A sharp, B natural, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, and then F sharp. Now, we can also call that G flat. So as you can see there, it's usually, you can go either or. So now we're going to call it G flat, A flat, B flat. Now, we call this, instead of B natural, we call it C flat, D flat, E flat, F, and G flat. So the F now becomes the only natural if you're calling it flats. So it's kind of interesting how that works out. But either way, we have 6 either sharps or flats. Let's continue on. Now we're going to go to the key of D flat. And now what happens is we went from 6 sharps or flats. Now when we go to the new key, we're going to subtract a flat every time until we get back to 0. So we were on the 9th fret of A for the last 2 keys. Now we're going to be 9th fret of low E and go from there. So we have D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, and D flat. Good. Now we zigzag across. So we were on the 9th fret. Now we're going to go to the 11th fret of A and go from there. So let me pull that up real quick so you can see it. So now we had 5 flats in that one. Now we're going to have 4 flats. So we subtract 1 and go from there. So we have A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, G, and then back to A flat. Cool. Now we were here. We're going to go up a string, still on the same fret, because it's always that same pattern. You do pretty much, you do 2 strings on the same fret, then you zigzag over and go from there. So now we're in the key of E flat. So let's look at that. The key of E flat is going to have 3 flats now. So we subtract 1 and go from there. So we have E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat. And a couple more to go here. So now as we move from the 11th fret of low E to the 13th fret of A, now we are in the key of B flat. And we only have 2 flats now. And let's check out what those are. So we go B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat. Cool. So you just have a B flat and you have an E flat in that key. And one more, that will be the key of F. So the way I had this on here is 13th fret of the low E string. And we'll check out what the flat is in that one. It's going to be a B flat. So we have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. Then what happens is we went from 13th fret of A, 13th fret of low E, then you're just back to a C again, which is where we started. So just to see this kind of quickly going through it in a linear way, we go from 3rd fret of A, that's the key of C, 3rd fret of low E, that's G, D, A, E, B, F sharp / G flat, D flat, A flat, E flat, B flat, F, and then you're back to C. So even just that right there is a really good practice to go through all of those, you know, maybe a couple times through and say the notes as you go. And if you get confused on what's what, just remember it's always in alphabetical order as far as the notation, and just remember how many sharps and flats there are. You just keep adding one as you go all the way up to F sharp, G flat, and then you start subtracting the flats as you go back on the other side of the circle of fifths. So that was the first thing that I thought could be kind of cool to look at as a foundational kind of thing. And the next thing that I think will be helpful to segue into what I'm going to talk about after that is, and I took this little screenshot from the same video I was talking about, that ideas for improv that I did a while back. Okay, so now on this picture here, we have the different degrees in the major scale is what I was going for here. So we've got the R with a little red circle. That's our root. Then we go up. This is how the intervals work in the major scale. We go root, then we go up a whole step. And if you look right under the W there, you'll see the minor. And actually, I should go back to the root. The root's major because we're doing the major scale. It creates a major chord as well. And that's where I want to go with this eventually. The second degree is what we call Dorian, and that is a whole step up. On the guitar, a whole step is 2 frets. So a semitone is 1 fret, or you could call it a half step, and then a whole step is 2 semitones, is 2 frets. So if we're in the key of C, that means we go up from C, a whole step up to D, and that's a minor chord. Then we go up a whole step again, and that's an E minor, and that's what we call Phrygian. Then we go up a half step, and that's our 4th degree, and that is Lydian. That's F in the key of C. And then we go up a whole step, and we're in the key of G. This is Mixolydian. And if we go up another whole step, we're in the key, or we have A minor, and this is Aeolian or natural minor. Then you go up a whole step, you have B half diminished. And this is really, I always think of the Locrian as just the inversion of the dominant chord. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here. And then you're just back to C, and that's a half step up from Locrian. And so again, you have root, then you go up a whole step, half step, whole, half. That's really important to remember because it can help you to understand how the diatonic chords or the chords of the key are built, how the harmony works. It's just really good foundational stuff to have going. Actually, I'm going to hold off 1 second because I see a comment or a question here from Andy. Is there a way to remember what sharp or flat to add or take away, or is it straight memorization? Okay, cool. So that's a good question. The way that the sharps work, you're adding, every time you go to the new key, you're adding the sharp that's a semitone below your root. So here, let me take this thing away. I'll come back to this. I'll come back to, I'm having a hard time. I'll come back to that picture in a minute. So the question was, how do you remember which sharps you're adding every time? So remember, the key of C had no sharps or flats for that matter. Now when we go to the key of G, it has 1 sharp, and we're adding the semitone below G is where the sharp is that we're adding. That's an F sharp. So that's the first one. Then as we go to the key of D, we keep that F sharp because that's actually the major third of D, and then we add the semitone below D, which is a C sharp. So let me know if that makes sense, but that keeps happening. Then you keep the F sharp, you keep the C sharp as you go to the key of A, you keep those two, and then add the semitone below A, which is a G sharp, and then it keeps going. It keeps going like that. Now, for the flats on the other side, I guess it would be the opposite. I haven't really thought about the pattern for that part because I just haven't memorized. But let me think about it for a minute. It must be the inverse of that, but I can't think off the top of my head. Okay, cool, you got it. So that's how that goes. And one thing about this, you just keep doing that. Something I was talking to a couple students recently about is just the balance. It's a really tricky balance between rote memorization, just memorizing stuff that you just kind of have to know. Kind of like, 2 + 2 is 4. You just have to memorize certain equations, certain things, certain patterns. And then there's practical stuff that you have to understand as a concept. And hopefully we can start to blend those two in what we're doing with this stuff tonight. Cool. Andy's saying never learned this stuff before. Very eye-opening. That's what I was hoping for. Is even though some, I know some of you guys will know this stuff, but some might not, and some might not have thought about it a certain way. And so hopefully this can shed a light on stuff. But it's always just good to refresh on it anyway. I think I know I have to, like, this is a daily thing I have to keep doing. And another thing that really helps with this is I would really recommend just trying to get a keyboard or some kind of if you have a piano at your house or just a keyboard, even if it's like a smaller one, just trying to play around with these concepts in a purely linear, one-dimensional linear pattern, because the guitar we have to go linear per string, and then we have to go a second dimension when we go down or up a string, which complicates things when you have to when you're trying to visualize the concept. Doing it on a piano might be a little easier to see. Oh boy, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so back to this graphic here. Now this one's important to remember because they're each one of the degrees that we play in the scale creates a chord, and this can really help us to improvise. And if you really analyze like for instance what Trey is doing, if he, like I just did a transcription for a minute of this foam jam, and if you really look at what's happening there, Trey is really quickly playing many really small chord shapes, like mostly just triads. And the thing with it is to remember that every key, now that's a tough example because he changes keys a lot in that one, but every key has 3 major chords, it has 3 minor chords, and then it has the half diminished, which again I just think of as the inversion of the 5th degree. In fact, a lot of them, it's almost like there's really just a couple of chords and they're just inversions of each other, or like shadows of each other almost. And I'll talk more about that as we go here. But in the description of this this live stream, I put a link to the first ideas for improv video I did. I did a worksheet for that. And if you haven't looked at that, you check that thing out, because it's pretty comprehensive as far as starting from just the one note at a time major scale, just C major, and then it goes through, and then we harmonize each step. So let's talk about that for a minute. So remember that in that last graphic I showed, it went major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor. Am I saying that right? Oh gosh, no, I gotta start over. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, half diminished, and then major again when you get back to the beginning. Hang tight 1 second, Andy. I will answer that question. He was asking, can I give an example of the inversion of the 5th degree with a real what I was talking about with Locrian, and I will definitely in a second. So what when we take the 1 octave of the major scale like that, what we're going to do is take the first note and then harmonize it with its major third. So the major third of C is E, and then we go to the next step in the scale. It's a D, and that's a minor chord. So you have this shape, and then you have E, which is also going to be a minor, and then F is major, G is major, A is minor, B, if you only are doing dyads, that's also just minor because we haven't gotten to the diminished or the half diminished for that matter yet, and then you're back to the root. Now, one of the main points of this, that's probably seems so little and simple doing that little thing, but what it can unlock for you is how you think of things. Like a major dyad or the beginnings of a major chord on the guitar, they lay out like this. You have a root, and then there's this mini diagonal shape 1 fret below, and that's one way that a major third is expressed on the guitar. Another way it can be expressed, if you're doing it on one string and you're doing 2 notes, you would be jumping up 4 frets like that. 1, 2, 3, 4 from your root. So root and then 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just that that's not that convenient. So it's good to know how to do it this way too. But I would say know how to play it in both ways. So you can play a major third like this or like this. And there may be times, well, I'm going to hold that thought because we'll definitely use that shape in a minute. Then the minor dyad, the minor third, can be expressed. If you think of how the major one looked, it was like this. A minor just means it's a flattened third. You know, so instead of the third being here, it's a semitone down. And so, whoop, drop my pick. So it looks like this, going 10th fret of E to 8th fret of A. Now the other way you can play a minor third, and this is way more common because we do it all the time in our minor pentatonic, is up 3 frets. So these are the same thing. You really, you may want to try to diversify how you see things, or how many different ways you can play the same thing. That's a really good exercise. Anyway, but it keeps going from there. The next one is E minor. So we're going to play that one with that 3 fret jump that we were just doing for the last one, like that. And then for F, it's major. And we can do this little major dyad like that. G is major. A is minor. B for now is just minor because we're only doing 2 notes. And then we're back to the root again. Now, let me hold that thought for a moment and answer this question from Andy. He was saying, can I give an example of how Locrian is just the inversion of the 5th degree? So let's take the key that I'm working out of right now, which is C. Now, in the key of C, if we count up 5 notes, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we get a G. Now, the key feature of the 5th degree of any key that we're playing in is it's a 7th chord. It's a dominant chord. And so what we're going to do is build a chord that is going to have it'll be a G7. Now check this out. What happens is if I make this G7 a G9, so this is a really common, especially if you're playing some bluesy music, you might have that kind of chord shape. So I'm just going 10th fret of A, 9th fret of D, and then 10 of G, 10 of B, okay? Just like that. Now, what I meant by the Locrian is just the inversion, is if I take this chord and take the root away and just go like that, now I have a B half diminished. It's technically, it would be missing, you would have to play the D, well, I'm pointing it the wrong way. But what I'm doing there is barring my ring finger on the 10th fret of G, B, and D, of E, and then 9th fret of the D string, and this is a B half diminished. B half diminished is just G9. They're the same. It's just about how you look at it, which brings up another point. And I'm going to do a lesson in the middle of the month on chordal ambiguity. So chords inherently are really ambiguous. It really depends on how you're looking at them and how you want the movement of a melody to work, how you view that. But as far as the notes that those chords share, they're almost the exact same thing. In the case of B, Locrian versus a G mixolydian, it's like the first inversion of the G9 chord. So again, if I take this chord and get rid of the root, it's like that. So Andy, let me know if that made sense. In other words, one way you could practice that is if you do like a little, like a chord progression, and let's say it's just a blues kind of thing where it's like a C, an F, and a G7, like the Wild Thing, or any kind of progression like that. Maybe try playing around with, when you play over the G7, doing like the Locrian. It's all just C major anyway. So yeah, let me know if that made sense, man. So back to that worksheet. The worksheet that okay, cool. Thanks, man. The worksheet that's in the description, there's a link to that. It goes from doing single note scale to major or minor third, which is what I was just doing, and then good lovin', there you go. Yeah, jam over that, and you'll and that those patterns will unfold for sure. Now the next step is then to add the fifth. So going from root to major third to fifth degree. So do do do, and this you get, like, speaking of good lovin', you could have love light. So these are just, those are just triads, and we're gonna talk about that now. So each degree of the scale, we're gonna create a triad. So here's a C major triad, then a D minor triad, an E minor triad, an F major triad, a G major triad, an A minor triad, and now when we play it as a triad, the B is just diminished. And then you're back to C, okay? Now, I'm going to play that again and really watch my right hand when I do this, because this is another point I wanted to make about this stuff, is that these little major scale things that are so beautiful and simple actually can double as really good technique exercises, in this case for picking. Where the last couple of things we were doing, like just playing the major scale or playing the dyads with major and minor thirds, is it's alternate picking. It's just down, up, down, up, down, up. Now we're going to stay with alternate picking, but what's going to happen now is that we'll find that every other phrase we're going to end up starting with a down, and then the next one will start with an up, which is really good, so you don't get stuck or get attached to only starting your phrases when you're playing with downs or with ups for that matter. Some of you guys might always start with ups, so this will be a good way to switch it up and start with a down. So watch my right hand when I do this. I go C major starting with a down, and then D minor starts with an up, then down, up, I'm really exaggerating, and then down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and it just keeps going. So that's a good one to get your picking dialed in as well. Now I want to say, like, I want to leave it at the triads because, like I said, I'm going to do a different video just on the ambiguity that chords have, that's inherent in them. But I don't want to get too much further into that yet, because I really want to do a proper breakdown of that and do it like a hopefully this is a well-made video, but a nice edited video that makes sense. Now let's say that you went to practice like the circle of fifths or the zigzag of fifths as we were doing it here, and then you were getting a good grasp of that, and you were looking to build on something for like just a practice routine. These are really good things. Let's say you want to mix between having time to improvise and just jam and practice doing that, and then time to have a really structured practice. This could be a good way to go. So let's say that you get the circle of fifths really dialed in. You figure you remember what the sharps and the flats are really well, and you want to go to the major scale, and then you're doing that. Well, the other step, so I was going like this for the major scale. Whoop. And doing it in this position with the middle finger on 8th fret of low E. Well, then think to yourself, okay, where's another play or another way I can play that same thing? So then we can play the major scale rather than starting with middle finger. Let's start with the pinky finger and play it like that. And then we had the one we did before. And then we're going to do one where we go pointer finger for our starting point. Now, each one of those could have a really, could be really beneficial depending on what you're using it for. Like if you like for me, I really like to work out of this, I call it the Jimi Hendrix inversion, you know, this kind of shape where you're just barring and then maybe you throw in the major third like that. Well, the first example is kind of nice, or the first version I did just a moment ago, because you can stay in that Jimi Hendrix inversion, just first inversion shape. It's like a G chord, you know, but up here. So if you prefer playing in that way, knowing your major scale inside and out in that position is really good to know. If you want to use this one, this could be cool too. You can get some really cool chord shapes out of this thing in here, for sure. So that one's useful. And then this one, the last one I did where you start with the pointer finger, the benefit of doing that one could be that, let's say you want to get way up high on the fretboard, that can be a good way to launch you from here all the way up. You could be... so it can just get you into a different register. And the added benefit, back to parlaying this into a picking exercise or just working on your technique, is that then what happens is you get groupings of 3, and that's really nice for economy picking. So if you wanted to practice alternate picking and really get dialed into that, you could do the the other positions, or this one too for that matter, or you can choose to do economy picking. And if that's a newer phrase to you, all it means is that if we're using odd numbers of notes per string, we just change strings on a down if we're ascending, and then we go descending, we would change on upstrokes. So you end up kind of doubling your efficiency. So like for example, on the major scale, starting with pointer finger on 8th fret, you go down, up, down, 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 and then back, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So you have 2 downs in a row or 2 ups in a row, but the 2 that are in a row are really just it's not 2 separate picks, but one motion, and that's where you can get speed from. So now that being said, you can practice it in the economy way with the 3 note groupings, and then try it in alternate and know them inside and out. Now another question here. So do you start with a different finger? Is it the same scale? I'm talking about just C major or any major scale or major key. I'm doing C just because it was the first one, but it's the same scale. So we're still just talking about Ionian, the first degree. So the first example, I'll go over it again, and I'll go really slowly. So we can have one version where we start with the pinky finger. In this case, I'm doing it on the 8th fret of the low E string, and I'm going 8th fret. Then I'm going 5th fret of A, 7th fret of A, 8th fret. Then I'm going down a string, 5, 7, 9, down a string, 5, 7, down a string, 5, 6, 8, 5 on high E, 7, and then 8. So that's just the major scale. And then I'm doing the exact same scale, but with a different finger now. Middle finger. And then I'm doing the exact same scale, now with pointer finger. And all of those are starting on the same fret, so that's and then you could practice a similar thing down here. You could be, and then you know, I would play around with that, because then you can really get around on the fretboard. And if you go back to that thing where you name the notes out loud, let's say that you really want to get all this stuff down. If you go through your circle of fifths and do that with every key, I mean, you'll know every note of your fretboard pretty quickly. Let's say you did that for a month straight, every day. It would take like, I don't know, 10 minutes or, well, maybe a little longer if you go through the whole circle of fifths. But if you cut it in half, maybe do half of the keys and then do half. I mean, if you do that for a month straight, you're going to know every note on your fretboard pretty quickly. You're going to understand which keys have which sharps, which ones have the flats, and so on. Now, okay, so now another question here. So is this what they call modes? This is different than modes because the concept of modes is, here, check this out. So the difference is I'm taking the same exact scale and just starting with a different finger just to get different positions of the fretboard, but I'm taking the exact same sequence of notes in the same exact order. So nothing's different there. Now, if I take the, let's go to the example with middle finger on the 8th fret. So if I take that and I start with pinky finger instead of middle finger, now we're talking about modes. Now that would be Dorian. That's Dorian, and then if I start with pointer finger, same scale, that's Phrygian. And then, then on and on it goes, Lydian. Whoop. And then, it keeps going. So that's mode. So that's a bit of a different, quite a different thing than the first thing I was talking about, but definitely know those two. And then, yeah, man, Phish is playing, so I totally get that. I'd rather be watching Phish too, man. Is it set break right now? I've had an exhausting, I feel like 2 months straight, and I'm so out of the loop. But I'm going to Alpine really soon, in a couple of weeks. I can't wait to get my, just have a couple days off and see some awesome music with some really good people. So, yeah. I'm out of the loop, so I hope you guys are enjoying the show. I'm gonna end it pretty soon anyway, though. But I just wanted to get some, really fundamental things. Like I said, I'm gonna add on to this with a separate video, and maybe this can be like an ongoing thing, just to help. This can help just clean up your thought flow, kind of gather your thoughts and how you orient yourself. And it kind of all goes from there and keeps branching out. Killer first set so far. Awesome. Good to hear from you, Tim. Cool. You know what? Just I guess the last couple minutes here before set 2 happens. Oh, here we go. Curtain with. Okay, fast enough. Cool. Oh, Buried Alive. Awesome. Camel Walk. Reba. Sample in a Jar. Pebbles and Marrows. Okay, that's awesome, man. I like the Mango song in there. That's a song I forgot that I had a lot of requests to do, so I'm gonna have to do that pretty soon. I'm doing the Taste. I'm doing the studio version of Taste. I'm putting that out tomorrow, and I hope you guys dig it. The studio version of Taste, Trey plays it quite a bit differently than he plays it live, so I hope everyone gets something out of it. Oh, thanks, man. Watching it on the replay. That's a good call. That's one of the cool things about just leaving it up is you can hit it anytime. All right. So yeah, just a couple more minutes if anybody has any questions or anything. Hey, JG Funk. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do the lesson. Andy, it'll be Taste tomorrow. Which is I think of Taste kind of like how I think of Golgi, where like for the most part it's pretty manageable, but then there's a couple of things in it that are really difficult. So it'll be a fun one. So anybody that's still hanging out, if you have any questions, I'll just hang for a couple more minutes before second set starts, and So fire away if you have any. If not, all good. We'll just call it a night and catch up next time. I love Curtain With, though. Man, that's an awesome opener. um, okay, can I give a couple quick tips for Wikipog? Like jamming over it or just how to play it? Actually, that's kind of a good, that's a good segue. The way I haven't played that in a while, but I feel like that's a good example of like when I was talking about doing the major scale with the pinky finger. That could be a really useful. That could be a good example of why that could be useful, because if you're playing in Wikipog, now really that's a Mixolydian vibe because you're hitting a C in there. It is in D, I think. Just knowing how to play those major scales, or Mixolydian for that matter, all you would do is switch up that note instead of a major 7 to a flat 7. For jamming, yeah, hey, you know what, Tim? I'll do okay, here's my quick answer, because I don't want to hold you guys up for the live stream. But my quick answer to that, and I'll add to this at another time. But when you're playing in Wikipog, and you're jamming over that D kind of vamp and all that, think of G major. That would be my bit of advice. Like, really, you can really like. My loop is messed up. Let me do that again. So. I messed it up again. Okay, here we go. Now, if you take that and play G major over it, you get. But the real key to it is to think of playing in G major, but really, like, if you kind of target the major 7, you'll hit the major 3rd of D, if that makes sense. Yeah, I do use a ditto. Yeah, I didn't think of the offbeat thing and how to do that with the loop, but yeah. So I'll come back to that, Tim, though. So there are a couple other questions here. Outside of modulation, how do you approach chord progression outside the 7 diatonic chords in a key? This is from MP Gallagher. Outside of modulation, how do you approach chord progressions outside of the 7? Okay, I think I understand your question. If I take for example, I feel like AC/DC Bag could be a cool example of that, or even Taste. What I try to do, if there's a chord progression that's outside of just the 7 diatonic chords, I try to group together as many as I can. So let's say there are a couple chords from one key and then a couple from another. I'll stay in one key for a little bit, and really I'm just trying to think of the chords anyway. I'm going to think of as much as I can in that key and then shift it. It's just that I try to find as many common chords as I can, so I don't have to keep thinking of different keys too often. Let me know if that makes sense, but that's how I do it. If there's a song with a bunch of different keys, that's how I do it. But at the end of the day, just try to memorize what the chord progression is and know all of the inversions of it. That would be my real answer, I guess. Know all the inversions, and then you can really get around. Thanks, Eric. Eric said, thanks, great lesson. Thanks for the great lesson. All right, cool, guys. So if you're just tuning in, yeah, and you missed it, I'll leave it up on the channel here, and there might be some cool info for you. I'm going to add to it And we'll do this again soon. So if anybody's at Alpine Valley, come say what's up to me if you see me. And hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show tonight. And leave any questions you might have or requests down below. And there's a worksheet in the link in the description. There's a worksheet that'll really talk about the stuff we just did tonight. So thanks everybody, and I'll see you guys soon. Check out Taste tomorrow. That'll be out. All right, cool. Later, guys.